guys, Josh from soccerreviewsforyou.com, bringing you my review plus on-feet video of quite possibly the most interesting boot that I've ever done a review on, the Puma Super Atom. Now, if you've never seen these before or never even seen a shoe like this before, that's because these are older than pretty much everyone watching this video. This is a shoe that comes from the 1950s. The Super Atom originally came out in 1952, and its claim to fame is that it's the first boot ever to feature removable screw-in studs, which this does not, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But essentially, this was a limited edition modern remake of the original Super Atom from 1952. They made 100 pairs total, all individually numbered on the box, which is really, really cool, by the way. I have pair number 41 of 100, and I'll put some little clips of the box. It's packaged really, really nicely. No extras with the shoes, just the really, really cool box. And like I said, only 100 total pairs. They released in Europe only, as far as I know. I don't think North America got any pairs at all. And the retail price on these guys was 300 pounds, which is the equivalent of about 375 US dollars. They weren't cheap, but they sold out pretty much instantly. Again, 100 pairs for the entire world. That's not going to last very long. So as far as getting a pair for yourself is concerned, you'd likely have to go on eBay and buy them from somebody reselling them, likely above the normal retail price. So please keep that in mind. With all of that said, let's actually take a closer look at the shoe itself, because it's very, very interesting, much different in person than I was honestly expecting. You can look at the pictures of a shoe like this, but until you actually get to hold it in your hands, a lot of it is kind of left to the imagination, let's say. And in person, I want to say that these are much worse than I was honestly expecting. Obviously, it's a full leather shoe, and the leather used isn't specified in the press release, but given that this is a shoe from 1952 made by Puma, a German company, they would have made them in Germany at the time, I would assume that it's a calfskin leather upper, mainly because that's what they would have had access to at the time. Obviously, kangaroo leather is kind of viewed as the premium leather nowadays, but in 1952, they didn't have any kangaroos in Germany, at least as far as I know, so it's very, very likely that the shoes would have been some kind of calfskin. Speaking of the leather and leather quality though, it's not the typical soccer cleat or football boot type leather. It's much thicker, it's much stiffer, it's very firm in general, and I think that's the most surprising thing about this shoe. These compare better to a pair of work boots than they do to an actual pair of football boots or soccer cleats. If you have a pair of these and you want to buy them to actually experience the sensation of playing in a shoe from 1952, I guess if you really have a lot of money to blow, go for it, but it really isn't going to offer any kind of, I guess, fun experience. I guess it's cool to wear them to a certain extent, but the enjoyment that you're going to get out of these is very, very minimal, because trust me when I say these are some of the most uncomfortable shoes and some of the stiffest shoes that I've personally ever worn, and that's surprising considering that it is all leather. Now, like I said, the pictures don't necessarily tell the whole story, because when you look at the shape of the shoe, it's obviously mid-cut, and that's something that has recently kind of made a comeback, if you will. I would call it innovation, because I wouldn't really compare this to something like a Superfly, an Obra, a Pure Control, other mid-cut modern shoes. I think that's obviously a lot different than this, pretty clear to see why. But with this shoe, there's so much structure to everything, especially in the toe box. You can see it has this very kind of high volume shape to it where it's actually quite tall. So when you actually put your foot in here, you're wearing the shoes, your toes, the top of them don't touch the top of the shoe. There's a pretty good amount of space there. And then what's even more surprising is that the toe box itself is so stiff. This has 2 layers of leather. You have the base layer, and then you have these 3 strips over top, and it's just super stiff. You can put these on and have someone stand on your toes, and it won't even collapse the toe box fully. It's almost like they're steel toe boots or something like that. So you could almost kick a rock with these things, and you wouldn't even feel it. It's a really, really interesting way of doing things, and I'd be very curious to know how similar these actually are to the original thing in regards to the softness of the upper. Now, of course, it's a natural material, so I assume that they would soften up over time, but out of the box, the stiffness on this upper is absolutely incredible. So you can see on the toe box, they incorporated 3 separate strips as I suppose what is kind of a reinforcement layer. Then you have this white bit running through the middle of the forefoot, which is kind of an interesting idea. That would have been another reinforcement piece. And then you can see directly through the midfoot, you have more leather in white with the stitching that again would be kind of your stabilization aspect through the midfoot. So even back in 1952, they were, I guess, knowledgeable enough and knew that, hey, if we just did straight up leather, there's going to be issues in regards to the responsiveness of the shoe. So they added these extra top layers of material to try and reinforce the more high stress zones on the foot, which is kind of an interesting thing. This is one of the original innovations that you would find on a soccer shoe. Obviously the screw-in studs is the key talking point here, but I thought that was something that's really, really interesting. Now, as far as the rest of the shoe is concerned, again, that base layer of leather is a lot stiffer than you would expect. I would say it's pretty soft, honestly, in the spots that don't have the extra reinforcement, but the toe box and the midfoot and this forefoot area, very, very stiff, both in hand as well as on feet. And what's also interesting is that there's no liner to the leather itself. So you obviously have the outside layer of the leather on the outside of the shoe, but on the inside, it's just the raw backside of leather, kind of unscraped suede, if you will. And that's really, really interesting. It would mean that these would absorb a ton of water and be fairly difficult to maintain for the most part, but given how thick they are, I don't necessarily think that durability would be too much of an issue. I think that's partially why everything is so thick. They really made these to last as long as possible, which obviously is not the case for a lot of modern soccer shoes anymore. Now, the lacing system, given that it is, I guess, a mid-cut boot, emphasis on the boot aspect, this may be why they're called football boots, is because at one point they were actually boots and not kind of more slim-fitting shoes like they are now. But anyways, you have this mid-cut aspect to the shoe where the laces basically go, I would say, what, a 20-degree angle from the toe box, which is kind of interesting. Again, you have a lot of dead space on the inside of the shoe. It's not as sleek or as slim-fitting as a modern boot would be. And then you have your metal rivets for the lace holes themselves, which I thought was a really cool aspect as well, or the metal rings, I guess is a better way of putting it. The tongue, full leather, just like the rest of the upper, and then you have this little pull tab here on the back, where the inside basically is this little strip here where you do have the face of the leather as your heel liner, but on the back side, it's just, again, that raw material, again, the back side of the leather, which you're gonna find a lot of that on this shoe. There's also a little bit of a thin layer of natural leather, the smooth surface going along the edges here at the very top, I assume to avoid any kind of rubbing at the top of your ankles. The laces themselves, they are about 6 miles long. So I have them tied up right here, and I don't want to even loosen them. I'll show you them a little bit later during the on-feet portion of the video. You'll see. But partially the reason why they're so long is I think that would have been, again, part of the getting the right fit and the right lockdown in the shoe itself, because what you're going to notice as kind of an interesting feature here are these little loops on either side of the ankle. Now, these loops aren't just there for show, they're actually pass-throughs for the laces, which I'll show you when you actually lace them up. You also have a little pass-through here on the back. It kind of looks like a pull tab, but it's not actually designed to be a pull tab. It's designed to run the laces through it, so you have some way of managing these really, really long laces and wrapping them around the ankle area of your foot. Again, I'm not sure if that was intended as a lockdown piece. I assume it would be, just because it is featured on the shoe as a placeholder, but again, something really, really interesting that we haven't seen on a pair of soccer cleats in quite some time now. As far as other elements of the shoe, obviously aesthetically, they look very, very old school in regards to the upper. It's black and white with the gold metal rings for the lace holes themselves. And then you have the old school Puma logo right there and the Super Atom branding in a nice metallic gold. So kind of similar to what you'd find on a Copa, which is pretty cool. And this is obviously pre-form stripe for the Puma brand as well, which is why you don't see the standard form stripe branding anywhere on this particular shoe. It's the old school Puma logo, which is really, really neat that they chose to put that on there. They kept it as original looking as possible. I'm not sure, again, how close this actually is to the original thing. The shoes are made in Vietnam. That would be kind of one of my main gripes here. If you're only going to make 100 of these things, they realistically should have been made in Germany like the original pairs would have been. I'm not sure if that would have changed the quality in any way at all. But if they're going to charge that premium price tag and they're only going to make 100 of them, this is not a shoe that they put out to make any kind of significant money on. It's more of a marketing piece. So I think that they should have made them in Germany. It would have made them that much cooler, but they are made in Vietnam. And I guess the one giveaway that this is an older, a remake of an older shoe, if you didn't know, is that if you look under the tongue, they actually put a modern tag on the underside with the sizing and where it's made and stuff like that. The usual Puma sizing tag, which again, why would they do that? Why wouldn't they just leave a marking somewhere on the sole plate for the size and then leave it at that? I'm not sure why they added that element there. You could peel it off if you really, really wanted to, but that is kind of a dead giveaway as to whether or not this is a remake or an original. Although I guess if you know your stuff, if you've been around that long, maybe your grandparents, they might be able to tell that these aren't actually from 1952. As far as the inside of the shoe is concerned, it does have a foam insole, although it is fully glued in, and I'm not going to rip it out because it's glued in there pretty well. But it does have somewhat of a mesh liner there on the bottom, and that's another thing that I'm not sure they would have had in 1952. I would assume it would have been a leather insole or a leather lined insole at the very least, so I'm not sure if that's some kind of modern I guess shortcut that they took for this particular boot. It probably is, but again, I can't really verify as to whether or not that information is accurate. And then moving on to the sole plate and stud pattern. Like I said, this shoe's claim to fame, and the main reason why Puma released this is it's the first ever shoe to feature screw-in studs, which this shoe does not. So the sole plate, as you can see, is quite thick, and from what I can tell, it's made out of wood. It doesn't look like it's plastic. It doesn't necessarily feel like plastic. It obviously looks like wood in terms of the stain, but it could be plastic. I'm not really sure. It's really, really difficult to say because of how good this finish looks. Nonetheless, it looks very, very cool, but it doesn't actually have screw-in studs, which I think, again, kind of lame if you're gonna promote this as being the first ever screw-in stud shoe. That's a major corner to cut. So instead, what you're gonna find is what looks like 3 nails for the actual studs themselves right at the very tip. And obviously it's a standard 6 stud layout. This would have been the only stud pattern at the time, as far as I know. I suppose it would be possible for them to put more studs, given that they would have been wooden sole plates. But this is the layout that you have. Would it provide the greatest traction? No, probably not, but not really comparing this to shoes that we have now. The sole plate itself, though, it's got really good thickness to it. If you're wondering about flexibility, there isn't any. They're just super stiff all the way through, not comfortable to wear whatsoever. The last thing to talk about is the weight, which I would say is kind of surprising. I expected these to be a little bit heavier than they are. This pair is a size 9 US, which actually fits smaller than a regular size 9 US. I'll talk about that in just a second. But they weigh in at 13.4 ounces, which is obviously very heavy. That's heavier than anything you can buy right now, about 3 ounces heavier than a Copa, for example. But even at 13.4 ounces, given the substantialness of this shoe, I guess how substantial it is what I'm getting at, and how thick and how stiff and how firm the materials are, I expected it to weigh a little bit more. With that said, if you were to wear these in the rain or something like that, given that everything is just raw leather with no liners or anything like that, these would absorb a ton of water and probably weigh a couple of pounds per shoe in the rain. So they're not light, but I think you guys probably could have guessed that. That's enough about the shoes though. Let's take a look at how they fit and feel on feet, which by the way, they just barely fit. These are a 9 US, which is what I tried to get. I assumed that a 9 US would fit me, but the sizing is a little bit wonky on these. Like I said, I was talking about the laces. Here's the laces. They are super long. They're probably like a 1/4 mile or something like that, but they go on forever, and they're really thick as well. It's kind of like an old school style lace, which is fitting for the shoe. This is probably what they would have had at the time. So I'm gonna loosen these up and put them on. They're very small on me. That's what I'm gonna say. So for those of you guys that are wondering if I can do a play test or something, unfortunately, they're just that small. I can get them on my foot and tolerate it for a couple of minutes for you guys, but man, these things, I can barely get them on. My foot is absolutely jammed. My toes are basically curled like this to get my foot inside of this shoe. So I'm gonna put them on. Oh, they feel so bad. The toe, like I said, the toe is rock solid. Like honestly, I feel like I could kick a ball and the upper wouldn't even move. So that's interesting. Just gonna tie them up though. And then I'll do my best to tie them using the actual system here that they've incorporated on the ankle and the back of the heel, which I looked at some pictures and it looks like there's a couple different ways of doing it, but this is how I'm gonna do it. So basically what I saw is it looked like they went from here through this, like that, and then underneath the studs, and then back around. I hope you guys can see this. Back around like this. At least this is what it looked like to me. And then back through here. Oh, you know what? That's actually wrong. Let me start over. This is really confusing. We're really lucky that we have regular shoelaces and regular lacing systems now. So this lace, you would go underneath your foot, you'd cross through the middle of the back studs, and then you'd pull it through the little ankle. Actually, no, you go through here, you go through the back heel thing back across. Yes. I want to say that's right. I want to say this is right. I could be wrong, guys. I'm just kind of winging it. There's not really any official information on this. So it comes back like this. So I'm going to do that again on the other side through here. I apologize if this is a little bit interesting to watch, but I assume some of you guys at least like to watch me struggle a little bit at this, so bear with me. I'm going to pull that through. Then I'm going to pull this through this little ankle piece. So I think this is right. So we're like this now. And then from here, we're tying it up. So that has a pretty interesting look to it. That took really long, and my foot is absolutely killing me because these things are super tight. So I'm just going to throw on the left shoe as quickly as I can. I'll try to replicate that because I believe that's the only way to lace these up, given how long these things are. Oh, it's terrible. Oh, it's so... Like, I don't think you guys understand how stiff the upper is on this, especially the forefoot and toe box. It is just rock solid on the inside. There's no hint of softness here whatsoever. So again, if you're planning on buying these to like play in them, you're going to be disappointed once you actually receive them because they are, like I said, not comfortable at all. So I think that was way too long, but okay, they are on. Oh, they're so bad when you stand up. They are super stiff. So you can see this is what they look like on feet. Obviously very old school. I don't know. I'm curious to look at the video of this and see how they look on my feet, but again, they feel so stiff. There's no flexibility to the upper. There's no flexibility to the sole plate. The heel liner is just rock solid. It's really firm leather. There's some firm material internally here to give some structure to the heel. And again, it's just really, really hard material all the way around your foot. They're not soft whatsoever. They're super uncomfortable. It's like the most uncomfortable dress shoes that you've ever worn, but 2 sizes too small for me because these just aren't my size. So overall, not comfortable. I mean, they look interesting on feet. It's definitely cool. If you wore these out on the field at a practice or in a game, you're definitely going to get some looks. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend playing in them. They don't feel all that great whatsoever. In regards to width, again, these are kind of too small for me, so it's difficult to talk about the fit all that much. They just feel tight all the way through. And again, that's kind of the nature of this type of shoe. I didn't expect them to really be the most comfortable thing in the world. And in regards to sizing, like I said, these are a size 9 US, and honestly, they're way too small. That's what I would normally wear in most shoes. And I feel like I would probably need a 10, maybe even a 10.5 in this particular shoe to have the right fit, because like I said, these are extremely small for me. So that is pretty much it in terms of the on-feet portion of this video. And that's it for the video in general, guys. That is the Puma Super Atom. I don't really know what else to say. I tried to break everything down as good as I possibly could, just because it is such an interesting product. It's not really a review, more so just a look at something from such a long time ago. Soccer cleats have obviously evolved tremendously since 1952. And that's pretty much it. Let me know what you guys think of these down below in the comment section. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to support it with a like. If you have any questions, leave it down below in the comments as well, and I definitely will get an answer out to you. Subscribe if you haven't already for daily videos on all the latest and greatest soccer gear. You can find all my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video, and thanks for watching. I gotta get these off.